As we continue our design series today, we're joined by Michael Holmes, Professor of Landscape Architecture. Thanks for joining us today, Michael.
Glad to be here.
Well, you're going to help us discuss some of those design principles that guide us in landscape architecture and landscape design, and there tend to be a lot of those. If you want to give us maybe an overview?
Yeah, sure. As you know, you probably talked about on your show, there's actually hundreds of elements that go into a residential design or any landscape design for that matter. Those elements may include hardscape features, of course plant material, numerous types of plant material, pathways, grass, turf areas. So you really want to figure, when you're thinking about those, how do you bring all those together? There's really three guiding principles to help you do that. That includes order, unity, and rhythm. So you should be thinking about these while you design.
Okay, and you want to explain a little more just what each one is?
Order is really the big picture, the overall structure of the design.
Okay.
So if you're thinking about your landscape design, your residence, you may be thinking, I want to do a formal or an informal garden. I want it to be asymmetrical or symmetrical, or you could use curvilinear forms or rectilinear forms. And there's a range in between, but what you're trying to achieve is a sense of balance or a sense of order that helps you unify all of that together. Okay. Another principle is this idea of unity, and that's how you bring together all those hundreds of elements that make up your landscape. And we're going to talk a little bit in detail about that and look at some examples today. Okay. The last one is this idea of rhythm, and a landscape's not a stagnant or a fixed structure. You don't see it from one location, you move through it. So the rhythm is how these elements allow you to move through them and how they adapt over time through the seasons. So, you know, everybody knows that their gardens have peaks and valleys. So that's part of the rhythm of the landscape. So in the spring, it might be a peak, and in the summer when it's hot, some of the things may go dormant, and in the fall, there may be another trend of color. So that's part of the rhythm. So pulling all these together is really key to successful residential design. Okay,
well, and each of these principles surely is a huge topic in itself.
It is.
And we'll focus in today on unity, and unity brings in a lot of the elements that I've covered on some previous segments. We've talked about color, form, and mass, and some other elements. So could you just give me a better understanding of unity?
Well, sure. Unity is, and again, it's bringing together how all the elements relate to each other in the design. You want to think about this at all scales. So so addressing issues of form, addressing issues of materials or hardscape materials, how to unify those to bring those together, as well as your plant materials, and then how they interrelate to each other as well. Okay. One easy way to kind of begin to think about unity is developing a hierarchy or a system of dominance within the landscape.
Okay.
All elements in the landscape are not the same, are not equal. You have major elements and minor elements. So identifying those is part of your design process. This is actually a good example of dominance. This is a grouping of plants. There are actually three different types of plants here, but they're all close proximity, and they all are kind of working together. But because of the vertical feature of this boxwood, it actually is the dominating element in this set.
And this could work on a small scale like this planting, or in a larger setting?
Very true. In your overall design, a lot of times the dominant element is the lawn area in a residential application because it's the largest element. Dominance doesn't have to be by size. It could be by color or texture. It could be also by location. You may have a focal point that's very important that you want to feature. But identifying those dominant features is really important to the success of a landscape.
Okay, well, let's look at some other aspects of unity. Another good example of dominance is this arbor here.
It is. It's actually in a prominent location between two pathways here at the entrance. It's the largest element here in size, which provides the dominance. It's also tied to this trellis walkway here, which provides a nice sense of repetition, which is an easy way to provide unity in a landscape.
Okay.
Taking elements, whether they're hardscape elements, whether they're softscape or plant material elements, repeating forms in the landscape is an easy way to provide the unity. So this walkway itself is actually made up of two parts. There's this portion here, which is the linear rectangle portion. Then the second form is actually the square that's anchored by these trellises. So this is repeated 4 times as you walk down. It all looks exactly very similar, but actually there's some variation at the ends on the size of some of these linear rectangles in the form, so you can provide variety that way as well.
But it all works
But
together
it all
because
ties
of the
together
repetition
because of the repeating patterns.
and the repeating trellises.
Yes, yes.
And you can also get repetition with your plant material as well.
You can. That's another easy way to provide repetition, provide unity into the landscape. If you, for instance, have like a particular variety of crepe myrtles, maybe in your backyard, maybe you use 5 of those, and in the front yard you may use 3 of those, and you could even accent with them in the side yard. So as you move throughout the entire landscape, there's that common element or common theme that's repeated throughout, just in material. So that's another nice way.
Okay.
Kim, another way you can promote unity in the landscape is by providing interconnectivity. What you usually have in a residential landscape, you have a patio, you may have some existing trees and shrubs that you need to design around, you may have a playground for your children, an arbor that you want to include. So what in this example, you can use a bed line. They're using a bed line to actually bring those elements together.
Okay. So in this example, we have this nice bed line surrounding an open turf area, and it kind of just anchors everything together.
Yes, yes, yes. As we look around this garden, you see that this open turf area here. It's actually kind of a dominant feature because it's the largest feature. The bed line is very important because of the contrast between the green and the brown. That's kind of the mulched area. It's also a vertical transition there as well, from horizontal to vertical. That's very important in providing this interconnectivity. You also, in this area, you also see repeating kind of these forms as you go down, these arching forms, which is a nice pattern as well. And then the interconnectivity of the line sweeping down the curvilinear line that actually comes back up here and includes this area as well.
Okay. Well, we're going to look at one more aspect of unity now.
Okay.
Okay, so the final topic that we're going to cover is plant groupings.
Yes, yes. An easy way to provide successful unity is using the power of 3 or groupings. It's almost always successful. Traditionally, our mind has brought 3 adjacent objects together, and we think of it as one. Historically, you find that in Japanese gardens a lot. A 1,000-year-old garden, they're using the same principles we are using today. You'll find a large rock, a dominant rock, and then 2 supporting elements in close proximity to that, kind of forming a triangle. But it begins to group as one. Okay,
so we see the 3 as being just one.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And we have some examples here in the garden.
So the same thing's occurring right here. This group of potted plants, they're actually in variation in vary in size themselves. Some are cascading, some are more upright. But because of proximity, we're bringing them together in our mind. We can also see that kind of in a larger scale. It doesn't have to be in kind of a site specific. It can be this larger area where there's 3 individual elements of potted plants here kind of tying together. Also in this plaza area, there's 3 kind of indented areas of the square. There's 3 corners that stick out there, and then the 2 benches kind of tie that back together as well.
Okay, and we see this in our plantings as well. Behind this area we have groups of 3 azaleas planted together, and even on a small scale in the window box we have those 3 trailing elements that kind of tie it all together.
Oh yes, yes. It's important to keep in mind that it's not just 3s. It's odd numbers a lot of times that do that. So if you're thinking about planting a grouping of shrubs or small trees, or 3s, 5s, 7s, 9s is the appropriate way to pull that together and provide that kind of a massing of plantings.
Okay, because in a larger bed, if you had a bunch of threes, it might look a little chaotic.
Exactly, that's exactly it.
Okay, are there situations where you might use two of something?
Two really works more informal or symmetrical solutions where you're using them as bookends.
Okay.
So on the ends of a linear element, if you have them adjacent to each other, the eye tends to want to separate them out instead of bring them together. So that's something else to think about.
Okay, and where might we use just one of something?
One, whether it's a plant material or whether it's a hardscape element, could be a nice focal point, or even a dominant element. It could be large in size. It could be have texture or color that's very interesting in a certain time of year. So kind of as a focal point or a main feature, it would be a good place to do that. But you don't want to use too many of those within a small garden. You know, maybe there's 2 or 3 main features. Probably 3.
Certainly,
Since
to
we're
keep
talking
on
about
our
the
rule.
power of 3.
Okay. Well, we've covered a lot of very interesting aspects of design here.
Just to reiterate, Kim, their dominance, so developing a hierarchy or what are the major elements of the design. A lot of times those are larger in size. Repetition is very important to provide unity. That could be repetition of plant material, repetition of materials, repetition of form. Also, having all those elements interconnected in a way is very important through forms, through using your bed lines or pathways to help tie those elements together. And of course, the power of 3, or the power of odd numbers. Pulling elements together, so we think about them as a group instead of individual elements.
Okay. Well, that's really a lot of interesting topics, and I appreciate you joining us today to help describe those a little bit better.
Thank you.